In order for you to change your life and to thrive, especially during stressful times, you need to understand some of the most important ideas that have ever been discussed in this area. In this episode of the Change Your Minds podcast, I'm going to walk you through 16 big ideas from big idea books that will help you to be able to not only change, but also to be able to thrive. We're going to be talking about ideas from Mark Manson, from James Clear, from Mel Robbins. We've got so many incredible authors that have sold millions of books, and these are big idea books designed to help you to transform. This is going to be a special one. See you inside. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Change Your Minds podcast. I'm Owen Fitzpatrick, and today we're going to be talking about changing and thriving. And we're going to talk through, as this is part of the Big Idea series, I'm going to walk you through some of the books that are big idea books that are famed for having a concept or idea that could be transformational. We're going to be talking about some best-selling authors out there that are bestsellers for a reason. And that is because they've come up with a way of thinking that makes it easy for people to make changes that can lead to their transformation. So I really hope that you find this not only fun and enjoyable, but also really, really useful. And we'll start with How to Change by Katie Milkman. And this book is a great book to help you understand some of the most important strategies you can use to be able to change any habit. If you look at the key idea, she talks about how behavioral change isn't about willpower or even about motivation, it's about strategy. And we must treat our obstacles like impulsivities that we have, or our forgetfulness or laziness. We must treat these as opponents that we need to be able to figure out psychological strategies to overcome. She talks about using strategies like fresh starts and the fresh start effect, where you start something and you start it on like the first of the month or the start of the week, or you create the conditions for a fresh start. Temptation bundling, where you're able to associate something you don't like to do with something you do like to do, something I use religiously. And then commitment devices. So an example of this, the notion of the Ulysses contract. So where you commit yourself, like Ulysses was on the boat, and the sirens were like saying, do you remember this? The sirens are like, hey, come over. And you knew that if the sailors in his boat were to hear it, they would crash the ship trying to get to the sirens, because that's what they do. They were sadists. These sirens, they just wanted to murder as many people as possible. And so what Ulysses did was he said, look, I still want to hear the music, but he made them, his sailors, tied to the mast. They put wax in their ears, and they made it so that they weren't able to hear the sirens. He was, but he couldn't do anything about it. So he was like, take me down, take me down. And they're like, we can't hear you. We don't know what you're talking about. They knew. It was making facial expressions. It was obvious. But they were able to get through as a result of that. And that's how Ulysses succeeded. Now, what has this got to do with habit change? Why have I gone off in this tangent? Well, to bring it back on track, when you use a commitment device or a Ulysses contract, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, well, if I want to eat healthy, then when I go to the supermarket, I'm only going to buy healthy food. And that makes it much more difficult for me to actually eat unhealthy food, because the only thing I have available to me right there is healthy food. So it's how can you create or set up your life in such a way that it makes it easy to do what's good and what you want to do, whatever the change that you're looking for, what's reflective of that change. The next book is Atomic Habits. This needs no introduction. James Clear has written a book that has sold millions of copies, one of the most popular books of the last decade or so. And the core idea here is that you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So habits aren't about discipline per se. He talks about how habits are about identity. So you need to change your identity. So a couple of takeaways from this is, number one, you need to set up systems that allow you to ensure that the habits that you built are things that are satisfactory, things that are easy, things that are obvious, right? Things that are rewarding. You want to make sure you organize the habits in such a way that they work. And so combining Atomic Habits with How to Change is a wonderful idea. And also the importance of identity. So in order for you to behave like someone different, you have to see yourself as the kind of person who would engage in this activity. That sort of identity commitment ensures that you're leveraging the power of things like cognitive dissonance to ensure that you are making the changes you need. So Atomic Habits, How to Change. If you're looking to change habits, they are two of the best books out there in the topic. There's also Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg and The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, which are also great, but would certainly start with Atomic Habits and How to Change. Next, we have Mindset by Professor Carol Dweck. This is obviously the classic book where Professor Dweck talks about the fact that some people have a fixed mindset where they believe this is the level of skill or ability that I have. this is my level of intelligence, it'll always be like that, versus the growth mindset, which is people that believe that they can develop, they can improve. And in order to do so, they need to ensure they're putting in the effort. They need to make sure they're getting the right kinds of feedback in order to be able to improve. They need to challenge themselves, and they need to continuously move forward and continuously look to whatever way they can to grow. But it really does rely on effort, feedback, and challenging themselves continuously also. Give and Take is the next book by Adam Grant. Adam Grant, of course, has written, we've talked about him before, he's written a great book, Think Again, amongst others, but Give and Take was his first sort of big book, and he talked about how the world is divided into givers, takers, and matchers, and he found that the people that are most successful and least successful were givers. Some givers were the most successful, but they were also at the bottom. When you're giving out of a place of sort of weakness, and you're doing it because you feel guilty or whatever, then you're not necessarily going to be successful. But if you become what he calls a self-protective giver, giving without burning out, giving for good reasons, then you're more likely to be successful as a result. So it's important for us to recognize that we can, and indeed we should, look towards being more of a giver, but the right kind of giver, if you catch my drift. Next is the 5-second rule by Mel Robbins. And Mel is very engaging, very charismatic, and very powerful speaker and communicator. And Mel talks about how you don't lack motivation, but it's the real problem is that oftentimes we'll procrastinate, oftentimes things will get in the way, we'll be distracted. And the 5-second rule is really you count down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then you take the action, and it kind of bypasses overthinking. And it's a great little technique to get you into the habit of just doing it, just going ahead and doing it. And this particular technique is great at helping you to make certain changes because it just gets you. You don't need motivation. You don't need all this sort of stuff. You just need to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, now I'm going to do it. And just allows you to really short circuit your thinking, which sometimes will go off on the kind of tangents that prevent you from making the changes that you want. And then we have Switch by Chip and Dan Heath. And Switch talks about the change behavior. He talks about the rider, which is similar to the metaphor that's been used before, but the rider, the elephant, and the pack. So the rider is, of course, that rational side of us. The elephant is more the emotional side, and then the path is our environment. And what we really need to do is understand that in order to make changes, we need to work on all three. So to be able to direct the rider, the rational side of us, we need to be able to focus on what's already working. We need to be able to be very clear and have specific, clear instructions of exactly what we need to do. So make sure that there's no ambiguity whatsoever in the new change. And we need to focus on the vivid, exciting destination that we're moving towards. In order to motivate the elephant, it's about finding the feeling that you need to feel in order for you to be driven by that feeling. So we need to find the motivation, break the change down into smaller chunks so it doesn't seem as scary. And then we need to ensure that we have this growth mindset that allows us to feel more empowered, that we can build a sort of identity that allows us to be successful in this new change. Again, not a million miles away from the work that James Clear talked about in terms of identity. And then shaping the path is creating the environment, which makes it easier for us to do. Again, this aligns with making it obvious or making it easy from a James Clear point of view, as well as it does the work on nudging, which is a concept in behavioral economics, which is really about organizing your environment in a way that nudges you towards the new behavior. And it's about building the right kinds of habits and creating sort of, as I think it's Katie Milkman that would have created these phrases, which would be implementation intentions. And if it's not her, apologies to whoever it is. But if this, then that. When this, then that. These are implementation intentions, and then also rallying social influence as well. That tends to be some of the ways to help you to switch your behaviors, according to Chip and Dan Heath. So great book, again, on habits. And to go into some of the books on thriving in the modern world and thriving and being successful and thinking in healthy, happy ways, we'll start with Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. In this book, he says that we've a limited amount of fucks to give, and happiness comes not from being indifferent, but on selectively caring about only the things that align with your values. So it's pretty much a book all about values. And I like the way it's written. And it's sold millions of copies. It's a very popular book. I think he's a really fun writer and very direct and straight to the point, which I appreciate as well. So definitely recommend checking that out if you're interested in spending a bit of time thinking through what really matters to you. And there's also then Everything is Fucked, his sequel to that, to The Subtle Art. And in this, he talks about the uncomfortable truth is that life is meaningless. So we build hope narratives And we still hope for this. And he talks about how hope is not necessarily the best strategy to have. And instead, we need to have what he calls amor fati, which is this sort of Stoic principle of acting without needing this future-focused hope. So it's like accepting your fate. And he gets in the book, he talks about things like the paradox of progress, where it's the better the things get, that oftentimes we make problems out of small things, and small things get to us more whenever we're not dealing with big problems and that kind of thing. And hope can also, as well as being a good thing, which it gets us hopeful about the future, sometimes it can make it so that we never feel that we're succeeding, or we never feel we're enough. One of the problems he talks about, the self-improvement field, is that we're constantly striving, and because we're constantly striving, it's almost like a message to us that we are not enough. And I think that's particularly important. And he goes more in depth into values in this as well. But again, I really like both of these books. I think he's a great writer, and I definitely suggest them if you want something that gets you understanding yourself a little bit more and reflecting on your values. Then we have Let Them by Mel Robbins. Obviously, we talked about the 5-second rule, which was her first sort of book that made Mel Robbins a household name. But Let Them is an extremely popular book, and I think it really resonates and speaks to what a lot of people are struggling with, which is that we exhaust ourselves trying to control how other people think, how people feel, how people behave. And the most important part is this detachment of let them. And this doesn't mean let them treat you badly, or let them break your boundaries, or let them whatever, but it's about not giving all of your energy to try to manage other people's reaction, not spending time obsessing with how other people are thinking and feeling. And I think it's an important concept. And in the book, she doesn't just talk about let them, it's also let me. And it's what can you choose to do next, to feel next, to think next. So it's let them and let me. And I think what's misunderstood often about it is that you're just saying, let people do whatever they need to do and blah, blah, blah. No, what she's really talking about is stop obsessing with how other people feel and think and all that sort of stuff. Let them do what they do, because you will never satisfy everyone all the time. And the more that you try, the more you're just going to continuously disappoint yourself and sometimes hurt others as a result. So you want to let them be them, let them do what they need to do, and let me do what I can do. And it's about separating that. And I think it's important. Let me be responsible for what I do. So it's not about letting people off the hook, but it is about recognizing that we can take responsibility ourselves about our own behaviors and our own feelings and our own thoughts. Next, we have The Gift of Imperfection by Brené Brown. This is one of our earlier books, and it's a classic. It's important that we start to recognize being vulnerable and being okay with being imperfect is so useful and so important for us. We hustle for worthiness, trying to be perfect, and this desire for perfection is stopping us. And she talks about being wholehearted and wholehearted living. And this requires the courage to be able to let go of who we think we are supposed to be, and instead embracing who we actually are. And the enemy that we have to overcome in doing so is shame. And she says we really need to give ourselves the gift of being imperfect, because that will transform the way in which we feel. Brené Brown is one of the top people out there. And then we have Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. This, of course, is the incredible book written about Viktor Frankl's experiences during the concentration camp in World War II. And throughout everything, he retained the positive attitude. He was asked how, and he said, they could take away everything from me except for the last of the human freedoms, a person's own ability to choose their own attitude in any given set of circumstances. And the key idea from this book is you can survive anyhow if you have a strong enough why. And his philosophy is what became known as logotherapy, which is an approach to helping people find meaning in suffering and find meaning in their struggles, which is a wonderful, wonderful book and wonderful idea and wonderful approach. Then we have a few books from Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday is famed for being one of the top experts out there in the area of Stoicism, certainly modern Stoicism. He's one of the most prolific writers out there. He's written some great books, and we'll talk about some of the virtues books in a future episode. But he started off, his first book in terms of Stoicism, I believe, was The Obstacle is the Way. And this is kind of like anti-fragility. It's the notion that the obstacle is not a roadblock, but it's the road itself. And when you can start to turn your adversity, your challenge, your problem into an advantage by controlling the way you see it, by controlling the story you tell yourself about it, and directing your action, this can help you to succeed. So the obstacle itself becomes the way through. And so we need to start to look at the challenges we face with a little bit more excitement that this could actually be exactly what it is that I need. His next book, Ego is the Enemy, is really tackling what he believes is the key problem, what the Stoics believed was the key problem that stops us from being successful. So the obstacle is the way is looking at how the thing that you think is the external obstacle actually becomes the very thing that allows you to see the way, whereas the ego is the enemy is looking at internally. And the main idea of ego as the enemy is that, and ego is seen as the unhealthy belief that we have in our own self-importance. Well, ego prevents us from learning, it blinds us to our own faults, and it makes failure itself devastating. And so for us to be able to succeed, we need to reckon with this, we need to understand this, and understand this tendency in ourselves. Confidence, as he talks about, is earned as opposed to ego is stolen. Stillness is the key is the next idea in the next book of Ryan Holiday's, which once more talks about a very important concept in terms of Stoicism. He says, in a noisy world, stillness, which allows us to get mental clarity, emotional balance, and focus, is the secret weapon of high performers. You can't make good strategic decisions when you are being reactive. And I think that anybody who is existing in the modern world will agree with this, is that there's so much going on. Very easy for us to feel overwhelmed, and it could be very difficult for us to make any sort of rational, smart decision when we feel like the world is just attacking us from all sides. So Stillness is the Key is a wonderful book, and it follows nicely from The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, Stillness is the Key. And he's a fun writer as well. He goes in and he tells some great stories, drawing from history, and they're relatively short enough books as well to get your teeth into. Think Like a Monk is the next big idea by Jay Shetty. And this big idea is to find peace and purpose. You need to detach from external expectations and noise and instead train your mind to focus on Sarva, what's known as Dharma. And you're not your mind, you're the observer of your mind. And a million miles away from the concept of don't believe everything that you think that we've talked about on a previous episode. But Think Like a Monk is a fun book. It's packed with lots of stuff. Obviously, Jay Shetty is well known. He's got a great podcast, but definitely suggest having a look at that if this kind of idea is something that you want to learn more about. And finally, The Courage to Be Disliked. This is a book based upon Adlerian psychology. And this is about Alfred Adler, who, along with Freud and Jung, became a well-known sort of psychologist that worked with people. And Adler's perspective is that your life is driven less by past causes and more by present goals. You consciously can choose interpretations because they serve some hidden goals. And the idea, even the concept of the book, The Courage to Be Disliked, is the ability to be able to accept your imperfect self as is, to have confidence in other people, believing in them and contributing to them and making it different. But having the courage to be normal, having the courage to be you, so that whether people like you or not, it doesn't necessarily affect you as much. So it's not a million miles away from the concept of let them, but it's some really nice ways of putting ideas across. And so The Courage to Be Disliked, the authors are Ishiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga, and I'm hoping that I got a relatively close pronunciation of their names. But in the book, it really does walk you through what I think is a really important skill, the ability to be comfortable being yourself. And if you look at Brené Brown, if you look at Mel Robbins, if you look at these two authors in The Courage to Be Disliked, they're once again saying the same kind of thing, which is that we cannot allow ourselves to continuously care about everything else. Even, The Subtle Art by Mark Manson is about not allowing yourself to care so much about what everybody else thinks in a way. And again, I think it's really critical that we start to reflect on that as one of the most important elements to help us to thrive. So to do a quick sort of check on how we got on, and we started off by talking about how to change. Katie Milton talks about some great techniques to be able to deal with the inner obstacles that stop us from making changes successfully through psychological tactics like temptation bundling, commitment devices. Atomic Habits, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. It's important to become the kind of person you want to be. Mindset, your mind and you can learn, you can improve, you can get better if you put in the effort, if you take feedback, if you challenge yourself. Give and take. Givers tend to succeed, but only when you're protectively giving. In other words, when you're giving from a place of abundance without burning out. The 5-second rule, count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and just take the action. Switch. The idea here is that you need to make sure that logically you've set things out straight, emotionally you're clear, and also that you've organized the path or the circumstances or the context of the environment effectively as well. And in terms of thriving, the subtle art of not giving a fuck is about making sure that you focus on what really does matter and what you value. Everything is focused about understanding that hope isn't always the best strategy, and instead we need to accept and we need to be able to get comfortable with where we are and who we are as we improve, as opposed to struggling constantly and feeling like we're always behind. Let them means let them be who they're going to be, let them do what they're going to do, and let you do what you like. Let me take care of what I can do and how I'm going to act and how I'm going to respond. The gift of imperfection is about being able to be comfortable with the fact that you're imperfect. Man's search for meaning is that you can survive anyhow if you find a strong enough purpose and a why, and finding meaning in suffering. The obstacle is the way, is the very challenge might actually show you the way to success. Ego is the enemy, as you need to challenge and overcome your ego if you were to be successful. Stillness is the key, is that the key to success and happiness is to be able to embrace stillness and to be able to think from that place. Think like a monk is to be able to detach from external expectations and to train your mind to focus on service and serving others. And finally, the courage to be disliked. You have to be able to focus on creating the right kind of interpretations for whatever is happening and focusing on what you want to achieve. And by doing so, you'll be less likely to worry or care about what everybody else thinks. This, I hope, has been a really insightful, enlightening episode for you. For now, I'm Owen Fitzpatrick. Take care, be well. May the forces always be with you. And I hope that if you enjoyed this, let me know if there's other books that you would put in here as well. And please do rate and review this episode. And please do spread the word. Let more people know about the podcast. Thanks very much and be well.